The other lessons have been posted?
The one yesterday has not been yet.
But the ones from last week
Yeah,
are
yeah,
there.
yeah. You want me to show you?
No, I've looked before. I just wanted to know that they're available for those who are absent so that they can at least get the information. I can't do anything else. Thank you, James. All right, we're back. Took him a bit of time, but we're back. Okay, I was saying that why I particularly wanted you to read this chapter is because I want us to zero in on page, at the top of page 91, at page 91 rather, where she presents the Jamaican classroom example. No, the example that she shows really encapsulates this whole idea of using the textbook principles in a sense to bring across whatever it is that the concept that you may be teaching in the language classroom. And this example primarily shows how language awareness, a teacher who is aware of how to use language awareness can effectively use it to bring across the structures to her students. Now the teacher was teaching pronouns. Were you able to read it now? Were you able to finish reading it? So we saw that she began with a song, and music is an effective way. It is a part of integrating both literature and culture in a sense. Because it can be, we can use a poem, we can use a song, different things that illustrate the different structures that we want students to understand. And not only that, what it does too is to make, if we're teaching a grammar concept or even a comprehension, but primarily a grammar concept, it makes it more communicative. So you don't have students learning the concepts in isolation. So it makes them able to see it in a real life setting and be able to relate to it. And that is what we want when we're looking at the authentic or communicative way of teaching grammar. So the teacher begins with this song. Were you familiar, either of you familiar with the song? You know it? Oh, okay, so you are familiar with the song. I think something has happened with Kira's video. I don't know, Kira, are you there with audio? But your video looks like it has stuck. Oh.
I was looking at the book.
Oh, so it's because your video wasn't moving. I thought that it had stuck or something.
No.
Okay.
I think I go to the book.
Right? So in a sense, it is walking you through the list, a lesson. But what she focused on as she went through were the different areas that made language awareness work. And the whole idea about use of children's intuitions. Can you explain to me from your readings? Did you get to that part? How did she?
Ms. Gordon, that was actually what I wanted to ask you about, because I didn't understand I didn't see how she used the children's intuition in the beginning to, I don't know, to get a lesson across.
How you don't see how she did this, or you don't see how to do it?
I think both.
In this lesson, all right, let's look at the example. What she's saying is that the children would have already been familiar with this song through their own experiences. It says that a critical element of language awareness in general, and with specific reference to the Caribbean, is starting with what the learners know, but cannot necessarily articulate. Remember that we're teaching an L2. And because learners have an L1, there are concepts that they already know. They know things. They may not be able to articulate them, but they have some underlying knowledge of them. This can be put against what we want them to know, guiding them and helping them to tease out the differences. So in a sense, what she's saying is that children already know pronouns. They use them. They may not know what they are called. They may not know that there are different categories of pronouns or what, but they know them. So you know, as a teacher, your role is to tease out that knowledge and make them realize that there is something that they're coming with. Is the whole, you can even link it to the whole constructivist idea about teaching, that children don't come to a classroom as blank slates. They have some prior experiences, they have different things that have happened to them, and it is for you now to tap into those intuitions and those experiences and help them to make the connections. So she said that you will help them, guide them, and help them to tease out the differences. The children are familiar with the hymn that uses both English and JC. So that's one thing already. It is something that most of them would have been exposed to. Even though it is being used outside of, it's not, alright, this is not important to us. At this moment, their linguistic knowledge could be said to be intuitive and in some sense formulaic. Language that is learned in chunks rather than generated for communication. Meaning, they know the concept, but they don't necessarily understand the meaningfulness behind it yet. So it is you know who will tap into that and guide them to where you want them to go. So you have been using these pronouns all along, or you have been singing these songs all along, children. So now you are helping the children to see, okay, so this is what you were saying, essentially. There is not initially much noticing of the features, as this is a song I've been sung in church, because exactly, the children are not going to pay attention to it, because they are not thinking about language. They are just merely thinking, they're singing their song, just as if you were to take a popular rap song or any dancehall song, one that we use often in our classes. Well, in my classes are songs by Vibes Cartel, as negative as he is. When I am teaching literary devices and I carry that song to the class, the children weren't paying any attention to the structure of the song. They were just thinking about the song and the lyrics, and they're thinking that the song bad, as they would say. But when I know I'm teaching them about similes and metaphors, I am working on that underlying intuition now to bring them to where I want them to go. Right? So they already know something. So it says that the only possibility of salience is related to the context. It would not normally be sung sitting down in a classroom during an English lesson. Essentially, what Brian is explaining here is that the song in itself is not something that the children would have paid attention to. The only reason they would start paying attention to it is that they're going to recognize that we don't normally sing this song in English. So there must be a reason. But essentially, it is the teacher's role to know, point the students to where you want them to go. So when she does this, there are some words that we use as pronouns that were used in the song. What are some of those words? What are some of them? What do you call yourself? The use of questioning now is zeroing the children and targeting them to where you want them to go, to where you want your lesson to take them. And where she wants them to go is to their understanding of pronouns. So that's one of the first things that they say that we do. So with the whole language awareness in building on their intuition is the whole fact that we help them, we bring them from the target to, from the native to the target, and we can use different ways of doing that. But the essential thing that we want them to do is, when we're incorporating language awareness, we want them to recognize that the structures themselves exist in their own language, so to speak, and know these are the structures in English, and to get them to become better users of language as they do that. When you look at the entire chapter, she gives you research to support the teacher's various strategies. We're not going to go through all the lines that the teacher says, but notice where she speaks about the role of the teacher on page 96. And what is very important to take away from this is that she speaks about the fact that for a teacher to use language awareness effectively, the teacher has to be knowledgeable. The teacher must know the target and the L1, know the features so they can effectively plan for the students to be able to, one, recognize the features in their own language and to bring them to the new language. Because you see, if it is not effectively done and planned, you can confuse them. And you can reach a place where if you don't understand the two languages yourself, you may end up teaching the children incorrect information. And she pointed out an instance where that actually happened in this lesson, but it wasn't significant enough to affect the students negatively. So any of the structures that we want to focus on, we have to ensure that we ourselves are knowledgeable of the features in the student's native language, as well as how we're going to contrast those now with the features of the target language that you want to show them. She also speaks about an important part of the language awareness is the whole idea of presenting cultural content. And we know that culture is one of the TEXI principles, the cultural principle, and the whole idea that through the use of folk songs and storytelling, we can develop even more language awareness. And it is not only that we are able to teach the students the structures through the languages, through their native language, is also that we get them to develop a sense of pride and identity in their own language. And it speaks about that whole thing that we spoke about power and identity, and for persons not to feel discriminated against and so on. She goes through the whole, and quite a few examples coming out of the North American context. And you don't have to stress yourselves about those if you don't have time to read that. I just want you to ensure that you go through the lesson and primarily look at what she says about the benefits of language awareness in a Creole speaking environment. All right? And that is essentially what we want to take away from the chapter. Are there any questions that you had from anything else that you read from it?
In the part where she speaks of the role of the teacher, and she says that there is joint accommodation. Does that mean, she said that in the Creole classroom, I think that there's joint accommodation. Does that mean that the teacher?
Give me the full sentence.
Oh my goodness, I have to find it. Just a minute.
Oh, I see it, I see it. In a Creole speaking environment, teachers share the home language of the pupils, so there is a possibility of joint accommodation to the language, where joint partners of communication and joint understandings about language help the children to accommodate to the specific learning culture and content of the classroom. What does the theory of accommodation says? You remember the theory?
That, it says that when you have that a speaker of a language, that the speakers of a language will try to either to make their language sound as close as possible to the person they're speaking to.
You remember that it's something like that. You can have convergence and you can have divergence, where you essentially use the language to create connection, or you can use it for separation, right? So in essence, when you share, if the teacher shares the home language of the students, joint accommodation here is that there is going to be some mutuality in what it is that we're doing. So unlike other language contexts than Creole environments, where you may be, say you are teaching English in China as a foreign language teacher, you may not necessarily be Chinese, right? But you may know Chinese and you are a native speaker of English, but you're teaching it as a foreign language. In a Creole setting, what she's saying is that most of the teachers in Creole settings would have shared the home language of the students that they're teaching. So because of that, language awareness becomes even more of, I don't want to say it's easier, but you are more able to facilitate that communication in the classroom. And there's that joint understanding that I am a speaker of your language. I can also bring you to where it is that I need you to go. And still both teachers and students recognize that. So they can establish patterns of communication within the class. So if you notice, even in the example, when the teacher says, extract 5, on page 97, when the teacher says, when we're referring to a lady, we still use him. In mother, outside. In book, under the table. In Jamaican Standard English, what would we have? in that situation, that teacher is switching between the two codes. And the teacher is able to do that because there is that level of accommodation, because she herself is a speaker of the language and she is able now to use it in a context to help the students to understand the structure that she wants them to understand.
Okay, but it doesn't mean then that in the classroom there would be using, like the teacher and the student will be using Jamaican Creole exclusively to speak to each other.
Exclusively?
Or more Jamaican Creole than Jamaican Standard?
But you couldn't do that, because if you do that, which taxi principle would you be limiting your children from getting?
Which taxi principle? Okay.
Think about it. If you're using primarily Creole.
Stylistics?
If you are using primarily Creole in your class.
Inputs?
Exactly.
Comprehensible inputs?
Very good, Lyra. They wouldn't be getting any oral input. And we know that it's primarily through the language classroom that our students are getting input, because we already recognize the problem. They're not reading. Sometimes the language is not sustained across discipline or content areas. So if a teacher of English primarily uses Creole, your children will not be getting enough language or a language input from you. And remember that the teacher is also a model. So the teacher must provide that model so that the students are able to pattern off that and learn the language as much as possible from you. So that is definitely not what she's saying.
Okay.
All right. So in essence, that I wanted us to look also. So were there any more questions?
No.
Okay, all right. So, like I said, I wanted you to look at the readings. Now, we did Pollard yesterday. All right. I sent you Christy. Open Christy 2003, please. From the readings that I sent you. The thing is, I want us to zero in on some readings, and I want to know if you have read them and if you have any issues with any of these articles, because I'm very concerned that the readings are not taking place, and if we aren't reading, we can't cite anybody. So I want to ensure that you know who are the Caribbean authors, who are the Caribbean researchers that when you need to cite, these are the persons who you should be citing. So tell me them, please, from all the readings that you have gotten, who are the Caribbean people?
Christy, Paula, yes. Brian.
Catherine Shields.
Shields, Brian.
Paulette, Christy. Craig, Dennis Craig.
Craig. Very good. Right? So all of these persons are the persons that you should be looking at if you are looking when you're doing your assignment in terms of citing sources for why you have chosen the strategies that you've chosen in your Creole speaking environment. Okay? So ensure that we do that. In terms of, I summarized the shield for you. In terms of any of the other articles, are there any other concern about those? questions that you may have encountered from reading them, any difficulty in understanding any concept that they put forward. I know I've asked this question already, but I'm asking it again before we go to the sample lesson plans and the rationale.
No.
Okay. All right. So in a sense, we're going to go to we're going to look at the lesson plan that I sent you.
Hold on. Let me get it.
I'm looking at the lesson plan on verb in sports or on, this is verbs in sports?
I'm coming. The one, not the PDF. All right, let's look at the sentence structure one first, since that one is easier.
Okay.
All right, so in a sense, we spoke about this yesterday, so we know that we are looking at, this is the section that we call the heading. Have we decided what it is that we're going to teach yet?
I have not decided. I am thinking for my lesson to do one on either on the use of metaphors as figurative language, sorry, or the difference between borrow and lend.
The difference between what?
Lend and borrow.
Lend and borrow. That is a big problem in St. Lucia?
Yes, it is.
Okay, all right. Have you thought about yours, Lira?
Not really. I've just been saying probably I'll just do the past tense.
Okay, there's no problem if you choose to do one of the areas that we have looked at. And our problem areas of real speakers, it doesn't matter. All right, so students, the general objective for this lesson is that students should show competence in the usage of the different types of sentences in written and oral communication. At the end of the lesson, students will be able to, and we can measure these. Name the 4 types of sentences. We can measure that. Transcribe Jamaican Creole sentences into standard Jamaican English. That would take into account language awareness. Identify types of sentences in speech and writing. Write a paragraph using the 4 types of sentences. Appreciate the fact that for writing to be interesting and exciting, the different types of sentences must be incorporated. Number 5 is not a good objective. Why?
Because of appreciate, I don't think you cannot measure appreciate.
Exactly, we cannot measure that, right? So this person said that they would use discussion, skit. If you looked at the handout that I sent you, and now one of the verbs that they use for the affective, it could be respond, or you could say children should be able to responding to questioning, state their level of appreciation for writing interesting and exciting sentences. But you are going to have to do something to decide whether or not they are able to do that. But otherwise, can't measure it. So they're using discussion, skit, PowerPoint presentation, group work, and video. For me, in terms of this, PowerPoint presentation is not really a method. It is an instructional material, and the video is also an instructional material. All right, and that's why I wanted to go through this sample, because when you look at it, those are not methods. If you see that there is a discussion, role play, you could put role play in terms of dramatization and group work. Those are methods or strategies that you use. Methods or strategies are essentially those language learning tasks that are supposed to bring out what it is that you want the students to learn. The video is an instructional material. You're going to play it for them and they're going to do something with it in essence. So PowerPoint presentation, and anyway, we can see that. Handouts of excerpt from novel A Cow Called Boy. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it is, oh, you are, wonderful. So that would be, what textile principle would A Cow Called Boy take into account?
Oh boy.
Sorry, what's the question?
What textile principle would A Cow Called Boy take into account?
A PowerPoint?
A cow called boy.
A cow called boy?
Yeah.
Oh, the use of literature.
Yeah.
Is the use of literature textile principle?
What's no, it's not. Let me see. Let me see the text principles. Where are they? It's inputs.
Yes, it would be providing input.
Yeah, written inputs. Yeah.
Yeah, and you could even make a case for cultural principle in the fact that it's a Caribbean story, and it would be reflecting their Caribbean identity, so you could write about that too. This is in a sense helping with the rationale. If we were to write a rationale for this lesson plan, there's no sample rationale for it. So I'm helping you to see how you would connect them. You could also, even though it's not a textile principle, A Cow Called Boy, no, you could now talk about the integration of literature like you just said. So you have to basically give a justification for why you have planned the lesson, how you have planned it. All right? No. This is not basic content. What is wrong with this basic content?
It's in points.
Not only is it in point, the basic
it's their objectives actually.
What should they have there?
The basic content would be the types of sentences.
Yeah, exactly.
Types of
Definition, declarative sentence. A declarative sentence, for example, there are 4 types of sentences. Language. 1, declarative, and you write what this is a statement sentence. Interrogative, question sentence. Exclamatory, exclamation sentence, and provide examples. And imperative sentences that give command. So when you look at it, these are actually almost steps. See there? These are steps using to discuss the lesson. It is not the basic content. So I sent these with the intention that we were going to do this in class. I am hoping the others have not turned up. So I don't know. I'll send them an email. So the introductory activity asks for students to come to the front of the class and to do a short skit from a script they will be given by the teacher. The short skit will be in Jamaican Creole. See that whole notion of taking the children from their native tongue to something else, from the known to the unknown, right? So then it's basically just a series of steps that they have next. So the introductory activity could be linked to the whole idea about language awareness and even identity. Then we talk about facilitate a discussion about the types of sentences heard in the skit. Teacher will give a definition of the 4 sentence types and their function. Based on the definition of the 4 types of sentences and their function given by the teacher, students will try to ascertain which sentence type which sentence type the sentences from the skit belong. You remember yesterday when I was saying, I think it was Mira's lesson when I was saying, don't give them all the information. It is in essence this. Notice what this teacher has done. The teacher gave them a role play in their native tongue. Then she gave them the definition of the types of sentences, but she didn't tell them which types of sentences were in their skit. So now, even though they have a definition, they now have to do some critical thinking to say, oh, okay, so if a declarative sentence is a statement sentence, that sentence that Sashana just said, that one is what I would think would be a statement. And then they would have to explain and they would have a discussion. So you're not telling them everything. You give them something, but you're leading them to the answer. You're facilitating it. You're allowing your students to figure things out on their own. And that is how you develop their level of critical thinking. Teacher will draw a table on the board consisting of 2 columns. One column will be labeled Jamaican Creole and the other Jamaican Standard English. Students will tell teacher the sentences they heard in the skit, and then the teacher will write these sentences on the board in the Jamaican Creole column. Students will be given a glossary of the Jamaican Creole words to be transcribed into Jamaican Standard English. The transcription will be written in the column labeled Jamaican Standard English. Now, as the comment here says, why just words and are not the sentences from the lesson focusing on sentences? I have a problem with this activity because it would prove a problem for some students to translate some ideas. So the teacher would probably have to translate the sentences for students themselves. Because the thing is, you're focusing on sentence structure. You're not necessarily focusing on, this is going to lead them to focus on verbs, focus on nouns, pronouns that are different, and it would become a little bit too complicated for them. And it's especially because that's set of grade 7 students. So you would not necessarily want that to be the case, all right? You don't want to give them too many activities that would provide too much of cognitive load on them.
Ms. Gordon?
Yes, dear.
In an activity like this, which I think yesterday we looked at different like varieties, I would say, of Jamaican Creole, like different ways of saying the same thing according to the region that you're from.
I think based on where the teacher will be teaching, it probably wouldn't be a big problem.
The same. Oh, okay.
Because we don't, in terms of our schools, you don't have significant, even though I showed you the variations, we don't have a lot of persons who really use Basilect Creole who would be in a high school setting. It's normal persons who would have had limited exposure to English, and normal persons who would have gone through some levels of primary school and so on. They would have had sufficient exposure to the English language. And again, based on the context that the teacher will be teaching in, you would know what sort of expressions your students would use and so on, to ensure that you put sentences that they would be able to relate to and translate.
Okay.
All right, we can skip step 3 because it's basically the same as step 1. Now, students will be asked to form 4 groups. Each group will be assigned one of the named types of sentences: declarative, interrogative, exclamatory, imperative. Each group will be given an excerpt from the novel A Cow Called Boy and highlighter for coding the different sentences. Now, in this activity, which 2 principles could you link it to? It could be linked to 3. We already said that the use of the story would be linked to the cultural principle. But when we look at the nature of the activity, which other principle can it be linked to? Which other 2?
We didn't say written input, no?
It won't be linked to input. If you're giving the students work in group, in a sense, what would the teacher be planning for?
Say it again.
Huh? The students are working in groups.
Interaction,
Yes.
meaningful interaction.
Meaningful interaction, as well as the authenticity principle.
Authenticity too, yes, right.
Right? So that is what I want you to see, so that you can write about it.
Okay.
All right, so that's that lesson. With the culminating activities, just pretty much the same thing. Teacher will need students into watching a YouTube music video on types of sentences. Then the students will write paragraph using different types of sentences. This will be more detailed. I want you to also move away from the idea that your culminating activity has to be a written activity where your students have to sit down now and write 2 sentences or write a paragraph. Your students can watch a video and you give them a series of questions to respond to on the video. Your students can do an interview for their culminating activity and then they write up that interview. It's not always that it has to be, no, go and write 2 paragraphs. Right? You know that they are going to have to do that sometime, but there is always this notion that if I'm culminating a lesson, it means now that my students need to write a paragraph. Write a paragraph all the time. Especially if your lesson really did not even give them, if you focus on any paragraph writing or anything of that nature. Sometimes teachers will teach you a poem, and then they'll ask students to write a paragraph about how they felt about the poem. It is always about writing a paragraph. Right? They could create their own response to the poem, create a video response to the poem, even a feelings charge like we did last week. So I want you to think about those things too. All right, we're going to look at the other lesson that has the rational attached. So we're finished with this one. Ladies, give me a second, please. I'm going to send class is not going to go up until 7. Just there, in case they are planning to zoom in like at about 5 or so. Okay? So let me, because I don't know what the plan is. Nobody, only Sashana emailed me about yesterday. She said that she's sick. I don't know if the others are planning to come, but I don't want them to come and not see us at 5 because I'm not keeping you here until 7. All right, let's look at this one. I think that I'm going to change it and let you just choose a grade. Would you prefer that?
I don't think it doesn't matter to me.
It doesn't matter to you?
No.
Okay. All right, let's not break what is not.
But you said initially grade 9, right? Grade 9?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so this is verbs. This person is looking at the present tense, right? So we have the headings as usual. General objective students will learn how to appreciate and correctly use the present tense form of standard Jamaican English during written and spoken activities. So this person shows the problematic area of the simple present tense. And we looked at that yesterday. So these are the objectives. And you notice that Dr. Focom gave a correction for the ones that I wanted you to note the corrections that are there. We call the definition of a verb based on their prior knowledge instead of recall that verbs are action words or words that express a state of being. So these are the objectives and we don't need to go through those. If you notice that the methods and strategies here are different from the other one, role play, guided question, listening, discussion, writing, interview. These are methods and strategies, all right? Not a video and so on. And then the instructional material, now we have the 1 minute and 30-second clip of sports commentary. These are your instructional material, laptop, speakers, handouts, and so on. Notice the basic content again. Here it actually gives a content, a definition of the content, unlike the first lesson plan. This one is what is expected here. So it's an explanation of your content. So it explains the first time frame which action can occur in present tense verbs refer to action that is happening now, present tense verbs, and even there's a table, right? This is good. You give a table and you show the different forms. When the third person singular he, she, or it is used, the verb ends with S to indicate that the action is present and singular. Right? So that's that summary. That's basic content right there, not steps. Introductory activity using technology and making it authentic and communicating. Teacher will instruct students to watch. Notice that this lesson plan does what I told you, that education in Jamaica said that they don't want to see anymore. Instead of the teacher will instruct students to watch a live football commentary, they would say, students will watch a live football commentary of the game, right? Remove the teacher equation from there after given instructions by the teacher. Students will be told to listen carefully. Students will listen carefully. That is the whole idea. It's about moving ownership away from the teacher to the student, making them the center. It is always good to put some of your discussion questions in your lesson plan, and it is good for you. I remember asking the questions in here if there was anybody who wrote the questions that they were going to ask their students before they did, right? And I remember us having a discussion about this last week. In writing this lesson plan, if you are going to want to ask students questions to generate thought or to provoke thought, it would be good to include some of those in your lesson plan. So we have the different developmental activity, the different steps. What I really want us to go down to. Notice how detailed it is. This is an assignment. Even if you normally write your own lesson plan in point form, for an assignment, you have to ensure that you explain your steps thoroughly, all right? And when you're going through this, we're going to note the comments that are there to the side so that we don't make the same errors. All right, the dialogue, notice that there is the attachment, the appendix of anything that you use, right? The dialogue the dialogue that was used in the introduction, this is it. Because he said that students were going to be reading the dialogue. All right, let's look at the rationale. That's really what I want us to do. So this lesson focuses on getting students to use the correct present tense verbs in the real life context of sports commentary. Now, one of the things, when you check most of the textbooks, when they teach a present tense verb, they make a lot of connection to sports because it is one of the most real life application of the simple present tense. When you think about a football match and it's describing it, they'll say, and Messi passes the ball to so and so, he picks it up, he scores. When you get students to recognize that is real life and authentic use of language, and especially for boys who tend to not gravitate towards English, and Brian mentions that in here, when you bring in something like this, it really, really helps them to not only become interested, but to see the language in a real life context. It is designed for a group of 48 7th grade students at Malden High School. These students have in the past shown interest in a number of sports. So that person is providing no justification for why they chose to use the sports connection, because this class has shown interest in sports. Malden High School is a rural, non-traditional high school in St. James. The students who attend this institution are mostly those who did not do well enough in their GSAT examinations to attend their schools of choice. It can be inferred that because the students are disappointed by their placements, many of them appear disinterested in school and display a range of behavioral issues. To reduce this attitude, new students are given a diagnostic test to assess their reading and comprehension levels, and then they are screened. The most academically capable students are placed in the first stream, and the other students placed randomly into classes. It's just a description of the school. However, the class for which this lesson is designed is one which consists of students who have mixed reading abilities. While most of the students are able to identify words, the majority of them are not fluent readers. These students also have a short attention span, and they're mostly from Creole-speaking backgrounds. Now, in this sense, some of you would have to write your description of the school that you are imagining teaching this in, right? And most of you are going to draw on the experiences of your own high school that you're teaching in. Because I'm pretty sure for this student, this was his or her school. So what it is doing is providing a contextual framework for the group of students for whom you're designing the lesson. All right? These students also, anyway, we'll just say that. Despite these realities, these students, once engaged, participate well in oral activities. Even within the classroom setting, they are more comfortable and willing to participate in the lesson, considering they are permitted to use their native tongue. Again, all of this is set in the context for justifying why the teacher did what he or she did. The classroom space in which the students are accommodated is small and crowded. It can be quite hot, especially when the windows to the side of the room have to be closed so as to facilitate the students using the whiteboard. All right, I just want to get down to the text principle. Okay, keeping in mind the unique situation of the students, the lesson plan is created to keep all the students occupied. In teaching, its teaching approach is largely inductive and provides the students with the opportunity to use their knowledge of sports to arrive at the facts about present tense verbs and how they're used, right? Lyra, what you were using yesterday is what we would call a deductive approach. In a deductive approach, you essentially tell the students the rule and then make them apply it. In an inductive approach, you give students scenarios and situations and have them figure out the rules themselves. right? And then you may present them. Sometimes you may even have the students generate a rule themselves, and then you let them see how close they came to what the actual rule for the language structure is. So that is what this person is saying that they're using now. This inductive approach simply means that the teacher doesn't have to give all the information regarding the topic. Rather, the students are able to make statements about the present tense by participation in class activities. With such a method, it is no doubt that students will be engaged in the teaching or learning process.
Ms. Gordon?
Yes, Kira.
The inductive approach that the student speaks of, is that similar to what Brian calls the student intuition, the children's intuition?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it would be similar. The topic of the lesson is chosen to get students to appreciate and correctly use the present tense verb form in realistic oral and written situations. Now the literature comes in. Pollard admits that the inconsistent use of present tense verbs is a problem. She further suggests that the best way to teach a topic is to create settings in which students can speak, read, and write. This lesson plan takes into consideration a recommendation of how to best teach present tense and has been socially modified to meet the demands of the Creole-speaking learners. With the integration of sports into teaching verbs, I intend to get students to have fun while learning. So that's one first literature reference used to justify why you're doing what you're doing. So in a sense, we know that's what a rationale means. We don't need to read here, so. This lesson plan is intended to engage students who have a number of learning styles by integrating the textbook principles of planning, input, language awareness, and culture authenticity into the lesson. And then the person explain what text refers to. In APA citation, and I'm really supposed to put the book there between two grammars. She cites Craig. Craig recommends the augmented language experience approach, and it is at the end of the article that I gave you. We looked at his tips for language awareness in class the week before last. Now, in a sense, the last part of the rationale that I want to look at you, want you to focus on, is that it shows how each textbook principle is incorporated, right? Considering the academic and linguistic backgrounds of my students, the first textbook principle employed in the lesson plan is that of planning. And clearly, all of you will have to write about planning because you're writing a lesson plan. So you now need to now look at what is it that she says about planning and how you incorporated that notion into your lesson. When Brian speaks of planning, she refers to the physical factors, tangible things that make up the classroom, spatial patterns, arrangement of the tangible things within the classroom, existential atmosphere, the general mood of the class, and the processes, objectives, and their steps organized by the teacher. Planning is incorporated in the lesson plan in the selection of the class activity. The large number of students and small classroom space do not make it easy to rearrange the physical setting. Planning is a factor in the choice of the introductory activity. So in essence, you're going to explain how the planning principle influenced what you did in terms of organizing the different phases and steps of your lesson. Planning is a factor, so it was a factor in the introductory activity. It was a factor in the video that you chose. So anything that you choose, you're going to justify it by looking at the various text principles, right? The person writes about input. I realize that Leroy is falling asleep, so I'm stopping. The person writes about input, the awareness, and culture. So in essence, it is not a hard activity. It's just that you have to sit down and you have to really look at it. You have to take today the time that I'm going to give you. By the time you finish the addition additional 2 hours for the class today, you need to know what it is that you're going to teach. That's the first thing, right? Kira says that she has an understanding. But you need to know what it is that you're going to teach primarily. And then plan the lesson around incorporating these things so that you can write lesson plan and then do the rational, because it is due on Monday. All right, and the weekend not so long, and you have children, and I know that you have families to take care of, and all of that. So, are there any questions regarding this?
No. Ms. Gordon, we send the assignment to you via email, or do we upload it to our VLE?
It must be email, because I know I don't have our VLE password. I'm going to, what time is it?
Yes.
Guess what I'm going to do? Can you give me 5 minutes? I'm going up to Miss Mills' office to see if it's just above me where I am here. I'm going to see if she had sorted it out. I don't want to wait to email her for Monday because their office will close by 4 and it's 3:30 now. So I'm going to see, my plan was for you to email it to me, but if she has sorted out the password, then you would upload it. All right? Okay. So I'll be back in 5 or so minutes. It might be a little bit more, about 7. While I am away, if you don't have any questions regarding the assignment, I want you to work on your 3-2-1 for the entire course. What are 3 things that you remember? And here's the thing. Because we've had classes for 3 weeks, I want 1 from each week. From the first week, the second week, this week. All right? All right, ladies, just email them to me because the office is closed. Apparently, they're at a seminar, so
Okay.
the most logical thing that I can think of is to email them to me. Are we ready?
Yes, I am ready.
All right, let's go.
Okay, I will start.
Yes, Kira, you can. You may.
Okay. In what I found interesting in the first was Christian's theory of second language acquisition, where he put forth 5 main hypotheses of second language acquisition. In week 2, I found interesting the Creole language situation in the Caribbean and the popular views and changing attitudes about the place of Creole in different aspects of society in the school, in the media, etc.
I'm not hearing you well, Kira.
Okay, in week 3, oh, I'm sorry, in the 3rd week, Creole in the classroom and how to get students to move from L1 to the target language. And that's what I learned in week 3, yeah. 2 things that I found interesting were the views on the genesis of Creole, the substractist and versus the universalist views. And the second one I found interesting was the importance of error analysis to teachers of English to find out why students make the errors that they do and how to correct them and help them to learn English. And one thing that I would like to go over are the texting principles of Brian, because I am not really clear. I read it, but then I didn't write any notes, so I'm not very clear. I haven't internalized the principle. That's what I should say.
Did you go through the PowerPoint?
I don't think so. I don't remember looking at PowerPoint on the principles. No, on the principles.
Oh, I think the taxi principles may have been, was that the time when you came to class late?
Oh, I don't know.
Maybe it was, I think it was that day. But I sent a PowerPoint on it which summarizes what is in the book. But you definitely have to read over those so that because they're pretty straightforward. Once you read it again, it should be clear to you. All right, so that's your concern. Lira, your turn.
Okay, in the first week, I learned the difference between BICS and CALP, which was the basic. BICS is the basic interpersonal communication skills that people acquire for them to communicate effectively with each other. And CALP is the cognitive academic language proficiency that is more considered the language that you learn in schools, well, learning standard English in schools. So that was in the first week we learned that most persons utilize BICS in most of the situations, casual situations, but coming to more formal situations, CALP is the one that is utilized. Second week, we went into some of the writers and what they've said about Creole, especially in how it should be utilized in the classroom. Should it be used in the classroom or not? And I learned that one of the principles that they said should be used to teach Creole speakers standard English is the principle of language awareness in the Creole speaking environment. So you make the contrast. Third week, well, basically we have been focusing on the lesson plan. So I can remember Brian's, how do you say it? Tessie? TESCE. Teaching English in the Creole speaking environment. That was, how do you say it?
I call it Texie.
Texie.
Oh, she pronounces it. I'm going to ask her.
So Brian states that Teskey, she states TESCI principles that should be applied to a a classroom when you are teaching English in a Creole speaking environment, which include inputs, ensure that the students get valuable inputs in the target language, interaction, so that the class is meaningful and authentic. Authenticity also, ensure that the activities are centered around real life situations and circumstances. Language awareness, so the use of contrasting the Creole with the English would be good to help the learners identify the differences so that they can avoid making errors between the two. And culture, which can be basically the literature that you use and all of that, so that students have that sense of culture and not shame when it comes to the Creole, their native tongue, and other aspects of their particular culture. All right. Two things I found interesting. The first one was that although all of the Caribbean countries identify English, standard English, as their first language, what actually we have noticed is that because most persons actually speak in the mother tongue or native language, and they struggle so much, even the students, to learn English in the classroom, they make a lot of errors. What I find is that probably the native tongue should be considered, the mother tongue should be considered probably the first language of the Caribbean countries, and English as the second language. Right? That I found that kind of interesting. It seems the other way around. And the second thing, I found that one of the effective ways of teaching standard English in the classroom was through the use of contrast. Okay, I never got that whilst I was growing up. I don't remember any teacher ever doing that, and that seems like something that would have been very interesting in class and, quite effective at the time that I was going to school. And I don't think I had anything that was particularly challenging to understand. Everything was pretty straightforward, just a lot of information to process.
I think that is a big takeaway from this course, because it's really 3 weeks.
Yeah.
It's 10 hours for the week, and it's a lot of information, a lot to process and internalize. I must say that it was really a pleasure knowing you two. I can't really speak to anybody else, nobody else is here. You've been faithful from the beginning, always on time. I was telling my friend who is from St. Lucia last night that he said he and I are always competing about which country is better, and he's always saying that St. Lucia is the only Caribbean country with 2 Nobel laureates. And I would say, but look how many other things Jamaica has. So I had to tell him last night that in this context he would win, because the St. Lucians are always on time, they're always here, and they're always prepared. So I told him that I'm giving him this round, so I'll come back in another round. But I really want to say it was great to have your participation in the class. I enjoyed the experience with both of you, looking at your own language context. I did promise you that I was going to send you an article that speaks about language in your context. And I feel that you won't be reading it this weekend. I am not going to send it to everyone because it's not on your reading list. But it would be interesting for you to read it to see what researchers are saying about what is happening in St. Lucia in terms of language. So I'm still going to send that to you. But I hope that despite how packed it was, that you were able to take away, well, based on your 3-2-1, it appears that you were able to take away some of the key areas from the course. And as we close, that is essentially what I want you to focus on. Whether English may have been your primary area of focus or whether it is just becoming that. The whole notion of teaching in our Creole environment is a complex one. And because of that, we have to be even more so equipped to ensure that we are able to give our students that those two things that we really want for them. We want them to be able to identify and appreciate their Caribbean languages and to recognize them as such. And we also want to equip them with competence in both oral and written forms of the target language, because we looked in that first week about expanding English and the fact that English is a global language, and if they're going to be able to operate in a position of power and be able to maximize educational opportunities, they're going to need English. They're going to need to be able to use the language and use it effectively. So those are the two things that our roles as teachers of English in a Creole speaking environment must facilitate. And in order to do that, we have to look at not only what the theory is saying about second language acquisition as a whole and as a process, but what the researchers are also saying about how it works in our unique context, because our Caribbean context is different from all other contexts. So we want as teachers to equip ourselves with both the knowledge, the theoretical knowledge, and the practical or pedagogical knowledge to teach the children that we're going to face in our classrooms. So as I will not see you face to face again, you may communicate with me via email. I really wish you strength, God's strength, as you, they say, mustn't talk about religion, but okay, it's just the two of us and the internet. I wish you the strength of the Lord as you go through the next phase of this program. It is going to be as intensive, and just say your prayer each week and ask Him to keep you. You have been going faithfully thus far, and I pray that you both do well. And the others, wherever you are out there in the world, I pray that you also do well, not only in this course, but in all the others that you are doing, and that you will complete the program to the best of your ability. All the best, as I always say, and take care. And maybe if I'm ever in St. Lucia, maybe I'll see you and Lyra will cook me some food.
All right, Ms. Gordon. I don't know why you're not teaching the second part of the course.
Because I am not teaching the second part of the course.
I mean, it's the same course. I can't understand why.
I don't know how they did it like that, but apparently that's how they did it. I was just asked to teach the first part. I don't know why. But I didn't question it. Because just like you, I am also tired. So it's really good. All right, so take care. Bye-bye, Lyra.
Okay.
I'll start early today.
Bye. So about Miss Mills, where do we post the assignment?
No, I didn't get them. I said it. Oh, you weren't here when I said it to Kira. Email them to me.
Okay, all right.
Okay. I'll sort it out after that.
Okay, all right. Bye. Take care.
Take care.
Okay, good.